What's up, you guys? Void here, coming back at you with another top 10 commander video. This time we're going to be looking at Dominaria, the 10 best cards, in my opinion, from this upcoming set. These are ones that I think are the best for your decks. I think they're either unique or going to fit in very well with a lot of other cards. As always, we're going to look at the honorable mentions first, and trust me, there were a lot to choose from. These three were ones that I believe were noteworthy. First one we have is Squee the Immortal. If you love the other Squee, this one is going to be just as awesome to you. Being able to cast him from your graveyard or from exile is ridiculous. There's definitely going to be some sort of combos associated with it, but having a commander that literally will not go away, because there's no reason why you just wouldn't let him die. There's no reason why you wouldn't just let him get exiled. There is literally no reason to ever want him to go to the command zone, which is so rare to have this as a commander, because most commanders, you have those certain moments where you just want them either back in your command zone or in your hand. You don't want them in your graveyard. You don't want them in exile. And this is all just based around advantage too. That's what Squee's really good at. Very underrated with sack outlets. If you need something that sacrifices a creature that you can easily just bring back like Squee, why not use him as a resource? Why not use him as sack fodder? Why not use him as discard fodder like the old Squee when you can just easily just recast him? I think he's really cool and he's going to have an impact. Whatever that impact is just not known yet to me, but I think he's really cool. And then we have Karn. You could also mention Jaya Ballard here, but I honestly don't think she's going to see as much play. Karn is going to see play in Commander, no doubt about it, but the creativity here is kind of lacking. Nothing is really inspiring about this card. It's just extra speed on the +1. The minus is just a way to recover a card that you lost with his plus. His ult isn't really an ult, it's just a -2 that gives you an artifact creature that's kind of like a pack rat for other artifacts, so doesn't really do anything super crazy outside of what you would want in an artifact deck, or even a planeswalker deck. Can't forget about those, but nothing really crazy. It's a 4-mana colorless planeswalker. You can't have him be too good or else he's just going to break standard. And then the last one we have is Joyra Weatherlight Captain. I really like her. I really do. I love these commanders that give you some card advantage, but that's about it. That's all she does. She doesn't do anything else special. Just a basis to build your deck around, which is historic spells. So you could obviously just make some sort of equipment deck, but you're probably going to fool around with all three different types just so you can get the most card draw that you can get. So this opens her up to being one of the 99 in a lot of good decks, as well as just being a commander herself. Overall, though, I definitely think that there were better commander options in the set. Moving on to the actual top 10 here, we actually have one of them. We have Grand Warlord Rada at number 10. Getting a bunch of mana when you attack with a bunch of creatures is really sweet. This is an incredibly aggressive strategy here. As you can see, she is a 4-drop with haste, which means that even if it's just her, you're gonna get at least 1 mana. But I really think she's even better as one of the 99 in other decks. Imagine token decks like Prosh, where you have a bunch of creatures. You could swing with a lot of those creatures potentially, even if they're not going to deal damage to 0/1 tokens. You could still get a lot of mana off of creatures and then cast more spells. There's definitely a lot of power here with this Rada. However, I didn't put her higher because she's not really interesting in thought-provoking in any way outside of just building a combat-based deck. A really aggressive one, don't get me wrong, dealing with excess mana is pretty nice, but she doesn't really do much of anything else. And then next we have a tie between both of the Teferis, Teferi Hero of Dominaria and Time Bender, the one that's actually in the set and the one that is in the Planeswalker deck. Technically they're both part of the set, but I don't really care. I'm just going to make it a tie between those two because they do very good things, and I think that they're on a very similar level. I think that the incentive to play Time Bender is going to be for the extra turns. Having a Planeswalker that you can have enter the battlefield with a doubling season and immediately just take an additional turn is ridiculous. So that's going to be a huge reason why anyone would want to play Time Bender over Hero of Dominaria. But I really do like Hero of Dominaria when you compare him to Venser the Sojourner. He has a very similar ult, but as opposed to casting spells, you want to draw cards and then you get to exile permanents. So the ults are very similar in that aspect, but his plus and minus to me are a little bit more favorable than Time Bender because you get some good value advantage. Even though you could still get some advantage off a Time Bender, I feel like there's more at cost there with his minus. But still, both very good for whatever deck you want to throw them into. Then number 8 is Mox Amber. This is a card that a lot of people have been talking about because you mentioned Moxes at all. The Moxen, they're going to lose their minds. It's free mana basically. However, it's not quite free mana because you do need to have certain conditions met before you can tap it for mana. You have to control a legendary creature or a planeswalker. So right off the bat, if you need something for colored mana, this is probably not the best option. I still think it's going to be a go-to for 4 or 5 color decks because it's so difficult finding good mana rocks that are going to tap for whatever mana you need. Might as well go for a 0 mana rock that you can easily just throw into a deck. Its obvious downside is that it's not going to really do much for you if you don't have any of those out there. And usually what you want cards like these for in the first place is to help ramp you up to get to your commander. Needing your commander to cast your other spells is going to be a huge pain with this card. So opening hand, it's not going to be as good as the other 0 costed mana rocks, but it's still going to be worth it for 3, 4, or 5 color decks that really need the mana fixing. Number 7 is Damping Sphere. I always love hate cards like these that aren't over the top, but what they do is they keep certain decks in check. And really the deck that I'm thinking about in Commander, I know some people might be surprised that I'm bringing this up for Commander, when really it could be used to hate on Storm and Modern just as easily, but Storm and Commander is still a pretty big deal. There are certain decks that can go off and win with some pretty nasty cards like Tendrils of Agony, as well as Mind's Desire, just ridiculously busted cards. Damping Sphere is going to make it harder for them to cast a ton of spells to get to those Storm cards. So each spell that a player casts is going to cost 1 more for each other spell that player has already cast that turn. So if they're on spell number 3, it's going to cost them 2 more mana, and so on. It's going to keep adding up, and it's going to make it next to impossible for them to continue their turns, which is nice if you're not the combo player, if you're not the player that wants to win off of Storm. But even if you're not playing it for that reason, you still have the upside of shutting down bounce lands. You could shut down Ancient Tombs, a whole bunch of lands, Cabal Coffers, Gaia's Cradles, that are going to produce a whole bunch of mana. This shuts those down as well. Amazing card. Number 6 is Lich's Mastery. I love cards like these that have huge downsides to where you have to play it safe, and usually the reason for a huge downside is that it has an incredible upside, and you have a hexproof enchantment here. You can't lose the game. Whenever you gain life, you draw that many cards is just incredible. It's a way to win the game. You're getting a ton of advantage. Already the spot where I think this is going to see a ton of play is in Oloro. You're in a deck where heavy control is the way to go. You're already gaining life. You're going to draw way more cards with that deck, and you likely are going to save up on counter spells to stop people from being able to remove this with some sort of board wipe for enchantments, which is just about the only thing that's going to deal with it in the first place. The obvious downside is that whenever you lose life, for each 1 life you lose, you have to exile a permanent you control or a card from your hand or graveyard, so you have to give up resources until you eventually are forced to exile Lich's Mastery, and then you lose the game. That's the obvious downside, is that your opponents could easily just gang up on you and force you out of the game. But if played properly, this is a crazy card with a huge amount of potential. Definitely something that a lot of people are going to be playing decks around, even if it's not a lore, even if it's just a deck where your whole focus is on gaining life. It's still a pretty cool card. Then number 5, we have Joda Archmage Eternal. He's basically Fist of Suns on a creature. That's just about it. It's really weird because he's 3 mana in Jeskai colors, but he technically counts as a 5 color commander because he has all 5 mana symbols in his rules text, making it to where all of your spells you could replace the cost for just 1 of each color. So that's really sweet. Like Fist of Suns, he's going to be perfect in 5 color decks. Like Progenitus, if you want to get Progenitus out, pretty much reducing that in half is what you want to do. And obviously you could throw in a bunch of other planeswalkers, cool stuff that you can work out with. But mainly where I think that Joda is going to work out well is going to be Eldrazi, is going to be these massive creature spells, or even not just creature spells, but just spells in general. There are a lot of extra turn spells that are insanely overcosted, making it to where you only have to pay 5 mana, even if it is 1 of every color, is cost efficiency, and you could really start going off earlier in the game. I really like this guy, and I'm definitely going to be making deck techs of him. Number 4 is Thran Temporal Gateway. This is very similar to Quicksilver Amulet. This, however, only works with historic permanents. So artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are considered historic. Those are what you could put into play, which is actually hilarious lot better because it gives you so much more to choose from. Now, certain decks would still want to play Quicksilver Amulet because they play really expensive creatures. Cheating those into play is always nice. But you have a bunch of expensive artifacts, legendary creatures. Not so certain about sagas yet, but you could go that route if you wanted to. You just have a bunch of options to play around with, and this card just oozes cool for Commander players. Having a way to cheat stuff into play is really awesome. You get around counter spells, you get around any sort of taxing when it comes to casting spells. Overall, I think this card, like Quicksilver Amulet, is going to have a presence in Commander. Number 3, this card is actually a reprint. This is Gilded Lotus. I love this card. The only reason why this isn't number 1 is because I feel like it would be cheating the set if I put a reprint at number 1. There's truly a whole bunch of awesome legendary creatures, but if you were to ask me what card is fundamentally going to be the best card in this set for Commander players, it has to be one of the best mana rocks. Having a mana rock that is going to tap for 3 colored mana is very unique. You don't see this with a lot of other mana rocks. A lot of combos with cards, it's very deadly with Paradox Engine for the whole purpose of just floating a bunch of mana. Like I said before, Storm decks, they like doing that, and Storm can really combo off with that card as well. But Gilded Lotus, even if you're not using it for combos, even if you're just using it for mana ramp, it's still insane. Even if turn 5, this is the only ramp that you have, it's still going to set you up for 3 extra mana your following turn, or give you a way to have 3 mana right there. So if you like playing control, it's a good card because you have mana to counterspell, you have mana to use removal spells. It's really sweet. Number 2 is Helm of the Host. I made a Commander must-have video on this card, and I really think it is going to be a blast to play with in Commander. Having something that specifically screws around with the legendary rule is going to draw a lot of attention, and I think if players start playing with this card, despite it having an insanely overcosted equip cost, which is really the only thing that I can think would hold this card back, it's still going to fool around with the craziest commanders you can think of. Whether it's getting you more awesome legendary creatures for combat, or just getting you more ETBs, getting you more ways to fool around with your team, is really sweet. And it doesn't have to be for legendary creatures, but that is really where this card is going to shine. And it doesn't have to be for legendary creatures, I know, but that is really where this card is going to shine. And it's just really crazy because we don't see a lot of these mirror gallery cards that are going to fool around with a ruling like that. And for that reason, I definitely think it deserves a higher spot on this list, especially for Commander players. Just the combos are crazy. There's the Aurelia combo, definitely worthwhile. And then we move on to number 1, which is Muldrotha the Gravetide. Very reminiscent of the Mimeoplasm, kind of that same greenish gelatinous ooze. During each of your turns, you may play up to 1 permanent card of each permanent type from your graveyard. If a card has multiple permanent types, choose one as you play it. My child grew from rotten ruin, yet she bloomed. Multani. Really sweet 6/6 for 6. Legendary elemental avatar. This is by far the most interesting legendary creature in the entire set. Having the wide open possibilities of what you can fool around with her is just ridiculous. You have the ability to cast planeswalkers from your graveyard. You have the ability to play lands from your graveyard. Granted, it is just during each one of your turns and only once during that turn, but still, the options are crazy, and you're just going to fill your deck with all these different permanent types so that you can really take advantage of it. But yeah, she's really crazy. She's definitely going to be a commander with a ton of potential. She is just that wide open. A lot of other commanders on this list, a lot of other commanders I'm going to mention in future videos about Dominaria, are very narrow, or they have a very specific playstyle to where it just doesn't really allow you to do much of anything else. She is wide open, and she's going to be crazy fun for brewers, and there's going to be, no doubt about it, multiple different decks built around Muldrotha, even if they are going to share that same graveyard synergy. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think about Dominaria. Let me know what you think about this top 10 list. Is there anything I may have missed? As always, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.